everyone, and welcome to another episode of 18-Minute Experts, the podcast that dives into the minds of industry leaders in our wonderful world of group benefits. I'm your host, Michael Kettner, and today I'm joined by a couple of industry thought leaders who are ready to share their experience and insights on the topic of identifying your ideal client. But before we jump into that conversation, a quick reminder to all our listeners, if you enjoy the content, please subscribe on Spotify and YouTube so that you can be notified and receive all upcoming episodes. You can also catch us at www.peoplecorporation.com/18min experts. If you're feeling ultra generous, please take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback guides us as we endeavor to provide the best possible benefit-focused content on the internet. Now grab your headphones, buckle up, and let's get ready for another episode of 18-Minute Experts. Looks like we have the Triple M Club here today with Mike McClenahan of BBD and Mark Etherington of Etherington Generations, and myself, Michael Kettner from People Corporation. Mike, Mark, thanks for joining me today. Starting with Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Perfect. Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to be here. Okay, I'll try to do this Cole's Notes. So being in the business over 30 years, started my career with one of the career companies, as we called them back then, and had a lot of great mentors. But then in 1988, I joined Benefits by Design, helped that organization to grow to about 100 employees, about 4,000 to 5,000 employer customers, and we partner with about 1,000 advisors across the country. And BBD's mission, which hopefully many of these listeners have heard before, but is to protect and promote the health, wealth, and happiness of working Canadians while helping our advisor partners grow. And probably the last segment of that is about 4 years ago, my partners and I came to the conclusion that we needed greater scale, essentially to continue that mission. And about a year after that, so again, 3 years ago, we joined the People Corporation family.
Yeah, and I know from personal experience back when I was an advisor, Mike, you helped me out a ton. I remember coming into the BBD offices saying, I think I have this great idea. And you just said to me, Michael, it is a great idea. And this is how we've improved it. And you gave me actually a better tool to go out to my clients with. So living up to the, helping advisors grow their practices, you definitely helped me out in the past.
Great to hear.
Mark, what about you?
Well, Michael, thank you. Pleasure to be here. And I have a slightly different journey, but a similar-ish number of years, although maybe a few less than Mike McClenahan. But I'm third generation in the insurance sort of world. And my grandfather came back from the Second World War and got involved with insurance. And then my dad and his uncle, or my uncle. And then I came in with my brother, and I've been in this business since 96. And Etherington Generations is sort of I would call us a boutique consulting firm. And our focus is really two-pronged. One is on the employee benefits side and retirement benefits, and the other is individual insurance planning. And I think our approach is really to be advocates for our clients and to be that voice, to provide them with good consulting services. And then ultimately, we try and intermingle or sprinkle into our business a lot of community focus. And that's maybe really what makes us a little bit different than some of our other sort of peers out in the marketplace.
For myself, I've had a bit of a different journey. I swore I would never get into group benefits. My dad founded a group benefits company here in BC, and he was working 80 to 90 hours a week to get it off the ground. And I just said, that looks like too much stress. And as life happened, I got hired into his firm without him even knowing about it, and got fast-tracked, obviously, through the organization, helped them set up their Ontario office. But as part of the process, I felt like there was obvious nepotism, and I wanted to carve out my own path. And so I had a conversation with him, separated, and started my own practice down in the Niagara region of Ontario. did that for 5 years. And that's where I was introduced to BBD and some of their products and solutions. And due to some family circumstances, we needed to move back to BC. So sold my practice, moved back to BC, started up from nothing again, and did that for 5 years. But then there was an opportunity to rejoin my dad in his organization. And the opportunity was one that I couldn't pass up. And so rejoined, developed a sales team. Over 4.5 years, we sold $26 million in annual premium without meeting anyone face to face, and all through sales process and whatnot. And so that was a ton of fun. And then there was an opportunity to join People Corp, and I couldn't turn that down. And so here I am doing this podcast with the two of you. So thanks for participating so far, and let's get right into our topic, identifying your ideal client. Mark, let's start with you and talking about the concept of an ideal client. From your perspective, why is it important for advisors to define their ideal client?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I was actually chatting with my brother, who's my business partner, and we were sort of going through potential questions for today. And he used the analogy of, well, when you date someone, you kind of have an idea of what you might think you would like. When you're buying a home, you kind of have certain parameters for what makes sense to you. And it's no different with running a business. You have to put some parameters in terms of what it is you think that is best suited to your skill set and to your capacity to deliver, top line advice and experience. So for us, I think, and I'm going to go a bit back and forth here, so apologies, but it varies over time. So when you're first in the business, what's an ideal client versus when you've been in the business for 30 years? Maybe there's a difference to what that ideal client looks like. But I think knowing what the type of client that you want to work with is something very powerful. And, at a certain point in time, as you start your career, you're probably willing to work with anybody who can breathe and maybe write a check. But afterwards, maybe that needle moves a little bit, maybe it doesn't. But I think defining who you want to work with, the type of people, and ultimately the scale of their business and your ability to then, again, provide advice at that scale. So, if you're a small shop and you're constantly going after 5,000, 10,000 people groups, do you have the capacity to service that? Do you want to service 2-person groups? There's nothing wrong with either. They just come with different expectations, different levels of work, and obviously different remuneration on the way through. So how do those models fit in? And so as we sit through and sort of contemplate our business year strategically, what is it that we're looking for as part of our conversation? And what does that client look like? But I think it's super important in order for you to achieve not only your business goals, but also for you to be able to deliver great service, which ultimately I believe is the most important thing that we do in our business. So that's why we would prioritize understanding who our ideal client is as we go into a year and then as we're put in front of situations.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I remember when I started out with my practice, I was, like you had said, taking anyone with a pulse that could breathe, fog a mirror, write a check. And I got myself into hot water a couple times, winning cases strictly on price, only to have it leave the next year when some other advisor walked in the door with a better price because they weren't an ideal fit. And later on in my business, I figured out that I wasn't profitable on clients until they had stayed with me for at least 26 months. And so while that client gave me cash flow, and it was much needed, I was actually backwards on the case. And so picking your ideal clients is super important, but when starting out, you're probably just going to take anyone.
Yeah.
Mike, from your perspective, you have this global perspective with working with a lot of advisors. What have you seen in the industry for advisors selecting the ideal client? For those that did or those that didn't, what have you noticed?
Yeah, and unlike yourselves, I haven't had to walk that path personally, but have had, as you say, the opportunity, I guess, to live vicariously somewhat through many of our advisor partners. And I think it is worth commenting. You both alluded to it, that sort of early on, client can fog a mirror, they're a client kind of thing. And I'll never forget When we expanded many years ago into the Ontario market, we're one of those funny little companies that actually moved from west to east, much like your dad's company, Michael. But there was a fellow named Chad, who is now a very successful advisor, but he was our first sales rep for BBD in Ontario for about 3 or 4 years till he broke out on his own. So 5 years after he became an independent advisor, my business partner Ron actually invited him back to talk to our entire sales team about sort of that walking through the valley of death, aspect of survival, let's just call it. And again, those things, like they burn in my memory, how he would talk about, the compensation or commission monthly from client ABC pays bill XYZ, like it's that sort of tight, right, kind of thing. But hopefully, once you do evolve beyond that and you have the luxury, as it were, to be a bit more selective, my sort of observations for advisors on this is that, and Mark alluded to a lot of this, it can help you define your own value proposition and longer term, which then in a perfect world informs how you build your business and resource it. Sometimes, but not always, this can involve specializing. It could be based on employer size or certain industry sector, or in Mark, we may talk a little bit about like association stuff, which we know you do work in as well. And I think it's also something that, again, this doesn't always happen, but if you can get that alignment of values where possible between yourself, your business practice, and your clients, it's just a nicer place to be. It doesn't mean you're going to be or even want to be friends, as it were, with all your customers. But I think we can all agree it's more enjoyable when you can serve individuals and their businesses who you enjoy being with and having those shared values.
That wraps up part 1 of episode 3 of 18-Minute Experts. Come back for part 2, where we discuss how Mark and Mike go about selecting their ideal characteristics and what you might consider as you apply some of that learning. Remember, your feedback is super important to us. It helps us design future episodes. So subscribe to our podcast on Spotify and follow us on YouTube.